The morning it all started. I was standing in my garage at 5 in the morning, watching snowflakes the size of quarters slam against my windshield, when I heard someone pounding on my front door like the police were serving a warrant. I had bought my snowplow business 3 years ago after leaving my job in finance, and winter storms like this one were my bread and butter. The forecast called for 18 inches across our part of Massachusetts, which meant I would be working nonstop for the next 48 hours. My route was planned, my clients knew their place in line, and I was ready to roll. What I was not ready for was Nancy Griffin standing on my doorstep at 5 in the morning, wrapped in a white fur coat that probably cost more than my truck, her face twisted into an expression I had come to know all too well over the past year. "Nathan Grant, I need you to clear my driveway immediately," she announced before I even opened the door fully. The cold air rushed in along with her perfume, which smelled like it cost about $300 an ounce. I kept my hand on the doorframe, blocking her from coming inside. "Nancy, I have a schedule. Your house is on the route for this afternoon, same as always." "Afternoon," her voice went up about 3 octaves. "I have a very important meeting with potential buyers at 9. My driveway needs to be pristine. As president of the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, I'm ordering you to prioritize my property." I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. Meadowbrook Estates was the neighborhood where I lived, a collection of about 200 homes ranging from modest 3-bedroom ranches to sprawling estates like Nancy's. She had been HOA president for 5 years, and in that time, she had made it her personal mission to make everyone's life as complicated as possible. "Nancy, I'm a private contractor. The HOA doesn't employ me. My clients pay me directly, and I serve them in the order they're scheduled unless there's an emergency." "This is an emergency," she insisted. "Do you have any idea how much this sale means? I'm selling my house, and these buyers are flying in from New York. If they see an unplowed driveway, they'll think this neighborhood is full of lazy people who don't maintain their properties." I glanced at my watch. 5:15. "Your appointment is at 9. That's almost 4 hours away. I'll get to your house by 8, which gives you plenty of time." "That's not good enough." She pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. "I'm filing a formal complaint with the HOA board. Your business operates out of your home, which means you're subject to our community guidelines. Section 12. Subsection 4 states that all home-based businesses must serve the HOA president's needs first in matters of community importance." That's not what that section says, and you know it. I had read the HOA bylaws cover to cover when I moved in, specifically because I knew Nancy would try something like this eventually. That section is about emergency services, like if my business was a plumbing company and the community center had a pipe burst. She stepped closer, and I could see the veins in her neck starting to pulse. "I'll have your business license for operating in this neighborhood revoked. I'll file an injunction. I'll make sure every single person in this HOA knows that you refuse to help me during an emergency." "It's not an emergency, Nancy. It's inconvenient. There's a difference." The snow was coming down harder now, and I could see it accumulating on her ridiculous fur coat. She looked like an angry, overdressed snowman. "Fine," she said, her voice dropping to something cold and calculated. "Then I'll make sure the HOA board votes to ban all commercial vehicles from being parked in driveways overnight. Your truck will have to be parked at least 5 miles away in a commercial lot. Every single morning, you'll have to drive to get it before you can start work." I felt my jaw tighten. She was threatening my livelihood because I would not bump her to the front of the line. This was peak Nancy, but it was also potentially serious. The HOA did have the power to regulate what vehicles could be parked where, and if she got enough board members on her side, she could make my life very difficult. "I'll plow your driveway by 8, I said finally. "But this is the last time you get special treatment. From now on, you're in the regular rotation like everyone else." She smiled, a triumphant little expression that made me want to slam the door in her face. "See, that wasn't so hard. I'll expect you at 7:30 to be safe." 8, I repeated. "And you're paying double for the emergency service call." "That's extortion." "No, that's business. You want me to rearrange my entire morning, you pay for the privilege. Take it or leave it." She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "Fine. But I'm taking this up with the board regardless. Your attitude is completely unacceptable." She turned and marched back down my walkway, her heels somehow finding purchase on the icy concrete. I watched her get into her white Mercedes SUV and pull away, her taillights disappearing into the white curtain of falling snow. I stood there for a minute, letting the cold wake me up fully, then went back inside to call my first 3 clients and explain the delay. They were not happy, but they were understanding. Most people in our neighborhood had dealt with Nancy at one point or another and knew exactly what she was capable of. My phone rang just as I was pulling on my heavy winter gear. It was Marcus Webb, my business partner and the guy who actually owned the other 2 plows in our small fleet. "Let me guess," he said without preamble. "Nancy Griffin is demanding special treatment. How did you know?" "Because she called me 10 minutes ago asking if I would override you and send a plow to her house first. When I told her that wasn't how we operated, she threatened to have my parking privileges revoked at my apartment complex." Marcus lived in a different neighborhood, but Nancy apparently knew people on his HOA board too. "She's getting out of control," I said. "This can't keep happening." "So what are we going to do about it?" That was a good question. Nancy had money, influence, and apparently unlimited free time to make other people's lives miserable. She had been instrumental in getting old Mr. Peterson fined $5,000 because his fence was 6 inches too tall, according to some obscure bylaw. She had forced the Johnsons to repaint their house 3 times because the shade of gray they chose was not in keeping with the neighborhood aesthetic. She had even tried to ban kids from playing in their own front yards because it created too much noise and visual clutter. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I'm tired of being pushed around." "Well, figure it out fast, because if she starts messing with where we can park our trucks, this business is going to become a lot less profitable real quick." We hung up, and I climbed into my truck, fired up the plow, and headed out into the storm. The streets were already covered in a thick blanket of white, and my tires crunched through it as I made my way to my first client. I spent the next 2 hours clearing driveways and parking lots, my mind only half on the work. The other half was churning through possible solutions to the Nancy problem. At 7:45, I pulled up to her house. It was a massive colonial-style home with white columns and a circular driveway, set back from the street on about 2 acres of land. Even covered in snow, it was impressive. Her Mercedes was parked in front of the 3-car garage, and I could see lights on in almost every window. I dropped the plow and started clearing her driveway, making quick work of it. The snow was still light and fluffy, easy to move. I had just finished the last pass when the front door opened and Nancy came out, still wearing that ridiculous fur coat. "You're late," she called out. I said 7:30. I checked my watch. "It's 7:53. You're fine." I wanted an extra buffer. What if the buyers arrive early? Then they'll see a freshly plowed driveway and think you're very responsible. I started to raise the plow, ready to move on to my next client. "Wait," she said, walking toward my truck. You need to do the walkway too. That wasn't part of the deal. I plow driveways, not walkways. You want the walkway done, hire someone with a snowblower. Her face turned red. You are the most unprofessional person I have ever dealt with. I'm reporting you to the Better Business Bureau. Go ahead. I have a 4.9-star rating. I think I'll survive one complaint from the neighborhood tyrant. It was probably not smart to antagonize her, but I was tired, cold, and fed up with her attitude. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a black sedan pulled into her driveway. The buyers, apparently arriving early just like she had feared, Nancy's expression shifted instantly from rage to a bright, fake smile. "Welcome," she called out, her voice suddenly warm and friendly. "I'm so glad you could make it. As you can see, we maintain our properties beautifully here in Meadowbrook Estates." I took that as my cue to leave, pulling away from her house and heading to my next job. But as I drove, I could not shake the feeling that this situation with Nancy was going to come to a head sooner rather than later. Over the next few days, the storm continued to dump snow on us, and I barely slept. My crew worked around the clock keeping our clients' properties clear, and the money was rolling in. But Nancy was true to her word. She filed complaint after complaint with the HOA board, claiming that my aggressive attitude and refusal to cooperate with community leadership made me unfit to operate a business in Meadowbrook Estates. The board scheduled a hearing for the following Tuesday, and I received a formal notice that my business license with the HOA was under review. If they voted against me, I would have to move my truck to a commercial lot every night, which would add at least an hour to my workday and cost me thousands in parking fees over the course of a year. I spent the weekend researching my options and talking to a lawyer friend who specialized in property law. He told me that the HOA did have the right to regulate commercial vehicles in residential areas, but that they had to apply the rules consistently. If they were singling me out because of a personal vendetta, I might have grounds to fight it. But honestly, he said, fighting an HOA is expensive and time-consuming. Even if you win, you're going to spend a fortune in legal fees, and you'll have made an enemy of everyone on that board. Sometimes it's better to just comply and find a workaround. I thanked him for his advice, but I was not ready to roll over. Nancy had pushed too many people around for too long, and somebody needed to stand up to her. The hearing was held in the community center, a small building at the entrance to our neighborhood that mostly hosted book clubs and yoga classes. When I arrived, there were about 30 people in the audience, including several of my neighbors who had come to support me. Marcus was there too, sitting in the front row with his arms crossed and a grim expression on his face. Nancy sat at a long table at the front of the room, flanked by the other 4 board members. There was Tom Henderson, a retired accountant who usually just went along with whatever Nancy wanted. Rita Marshall, a middle-aged woman who ran a local real estate agency and seemed to genuinely care about the neighborhood. David Park, a lawyer who had only recently moved to the area and still seemed to be figuring out the power dynamics. And finally, Susan Chen, who owned a small chain of restaurants and had clashed with Nancy on multiple occasions. Nancy called the meeting to order and immediately launched into her complaints. She painted me as unprofessional, aggressive, and unwilling to cooperate with community leadership. She claimed that I had used threatening language during our interaction, and that my refusal to prioritize HOA needs showed a fundamental disrespect for the community. "Mr. Grant operates a commercial business out of his home," she said, her voice full of righteous indignation. "That's a privilege, not a right, and with that privilege comes responsibility. He needs to understand that living in Meadowbrook Estates means putting the community first." When she finally finished her speech, Rita Marshall turned to me. "Nathan, would you like to respond?" I stood up, my notes in hand, but I decided to wing it instead. "Nancy is upset because I would not drop everything to plow her driveway first during the snowstorm last week. I had a schedule. I had other clients waiting, and I told her I would get to her house by 8 in the morning, which was well before her 9 o'clock appointment. That was not good enough for her, so now she's trying to use her position as HOA president to punish me." "That's not true," Nancy interjected. "This is about your attitude and your refusal to cooperate. No, this is about you abusing your power because you did not get your way." I looked at the other board members. "How many of you have been on the receiving end of one of Nancy's demands? How many times has she threatened to fine you or report you or make your life difficult because you did not do exactly what she wanted?" There was a murmur from the audience, and I saw several people nodding. David Park looked uncomfortable, and Susan Chen was watching Nancy with a thoughtful expression. "This is completely out of line," Nancy said. "We're here to discuss your business practices, not my leadership." "Your leadership is exactly what we should be discussing," said a voice from the audience. It was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who lived 3 houses down from me. "You fined my son $500 because his car was parked in my driveway for more than 72 hours while he was helping me recover from surgery. You have made this neighborhood feel like a police state." "I was enforcing the rules," Nancy said, her voice rising. "Rules that were democratically agreed upon. Rules that you selectively enforce depending on whether you like the person or not," Marcus called out. "You tried to fine Nathan for parking his truck in his driveway overnight, but you have not said a word about Jerry Collins parking his boat in his driveway for the past 6 months. Jerry's boat is covered with a tarp," Nancy said. "It's not an eyesore like Nathan's commercial vehicle." "My truck is a Ford F-250, I said. "Half the people in this neighborhood drive trucks just like it. The only difference is mine has a plow attachment." The meeting devolved into chaos after that, with multiple people shouting over each other. Finally, Rita Marshall stood up and called for order. "Enough," she said firmly. "We're going to take a vote on whether to restrict Nathan's parking privileges. All in favor?" Nancy's hand shot up immediately, followed more slowly by Tom Henderson's. The other 3 board members kept their hands down. All opposed. Rita, Susan, and David raised their hands. "The motion fails," Rita said. "Nathan, you can continue parking your truck in your driveway. Nancy, I think we need to have a separate conversation about how these complaints are being filed and whether they're appropriate." Nancy looked like she had been slapped. Her face went pale, then flushed red. "This is outrageous. I'm the president of this board, and my concerns should be taken seriously." "Your concerns are taken seriously," David said, speaking up for the first time. "But using your position to settle personal vendettas is not appropriate. If you have a legitimate complaint about Nathan's business practices, that's one thing. But this clearly seems to be about the fact that he did not prioritize your driveway." Nancy gathered her papers with shaking hands. "I see how this is going to be. Fine. But don't come crying to me when this neighborhood falls apart because we stopped enforcing standards." She stormed out of the room, leaving the other board members looking at each other awkwardly. The meeting adjourned shortly after, and I was surrounded by neighbors congratulating me and sharing their own Nancy horror stories. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "Well, you won that round, but something tells me this is not over." He was right. Over the next few weeks, Nancy ramped up her campaign against me. She filed noise complaints with the police, claiming my truck was too loud when I left for work in the morning. She reported me to the town's zoning board, claiming I was running an illegal commercial operation. She even tried to organize a petition to ban all snow removal services from operating in the neighborhood, which would have put me out of business entirely. None of her efforts worked. The police told her there were no noise ordinances being violated. The zoning board confirmed that my business license was legitimate, and her petition got exactly 7 signatures, most of them from people who probably did not even read what they were signing. But the harassment was wearing on me. Every day brought a new complaint, a new threat, a new attempt to make my life difficult. I was spending more time dealing with Nancy's nonsense than I was running my business. Then, in early February, something interesting happened. I was having lunch with an old colleague from my finance days, a guy named Richard, who now worked in private equity and investment banking. We were catching up at a restaurant in downtown Boston when he mentioned that his firm had just acquired a portfolio of residential mortgages from a bank that was downsizing. "It's mostly Massachusetts properties," he said. "A few in New Hampshire. We're reviewing them now to decide which ones to keep and which ones to sell off." Something clicked in my brain. These mortgages, they would not happen to include any properties in Meadowbrook Estates, would they? Richard pulled out his phone and scrolled through some documents. "Actually, yes. We have about 15 mortgages in that development." "Why?" I explained the situation with Nancy, and Richard listened with growing amusement. "So this HOA president has been making your life hell, and now you want to know if we own her mortgage, something like that. I'm just curious." He tapped on his phone some more, then his eyebrows went up. "Nancy Griffin, 47 Oakmont Drive. That's her. We own her mortgage. Took it over about 3 weeks ago when we acquired the portfolio. She's got about $600,000 outstanding on a 30-year note." My heart started beating faster. "And your firm is selling off some of these mortgages?" "Yeah, the ones that don't fit our investment criteria. Nancy Griffin's mortgage is actually on that list. The property is nice, but she's been late on payments 3 times in the past year. We prefer assets that don't require active management." "How much would it cost to buy that mortgage?" Richard looked at me like I had grown a second head. "You want to buy Nancy Griffin's mortgage? Maybe. How much?" He did some quick calculations on his phone. "Given the property value and the payment history, we'd probably let it go for around $550,000. That's a small discount because of the late payments." "Are you serious about this?" I thought about it for a minute. I had money saved from my finance days, and the Snowplow business had been profitable. $550,000 was a lot, but it was not impossible. More importantly, owning Nancy's mortgage would give me leverage. She would not be able to threaten me anymore if I literally held the paper on her house. "Let me think about it," I said. "Can you hold off on selling it for a week or 2 while I figure out my finances?" "Sure, I can do that, but Nathan, this is a big move. Make sure you know what you're getting into." Over the next week, I talked to my accountant, my lawyer friend, and Marcus. The general consensus was that it was a risky move, but potentially brilliant. If I owned Nancy's mortgage and she defaulted, I could foreclose. Even if she did not default, just knowing that I had that power might be enough to get her to back off. I crunched the numbers and realized I could make it work. I would have to liquidate some investments and take out a small business loan, but I could come up with the $550,000. The question was whether it was worth it. Marcus made the decision easy. "Do it," he said. "Nancy has been a nightmare for everyone in this neighborhood for years. If you have a chance to get some leverage over her, take it. Worst case scenario, it's a decent investment. The house is worth way more than what you're paying, so even if you do end up foreclosing, you'll make money." I called Richard and told him I was in. He drew up the paperwork, and 2 weeks later, I was the proud owner of Nancy Griffin's mortgage. The whole transaction was done quietly, with no public record beyond the usual mortgage transfer documents. Nancy would have been notified by mail that her mortgage had been sold to a new entity, but there was no reason for her to connect it to me. I had set up an LLC specifically for this purchase, using a name that did not obviously link back to me. For a few weeks, nothing changed. Nancy continued her harassment campaign, filing complaints and trying to make my life difficult. But now I had an ace up my sleeve, and I was waiting for the right moment to play it. That moment came in late February. I received a notice that there would be an emergency HOA board meeting to discuss ongoing issues with commercial operations in residential areas. It was clear that Nancy was making another run at getting my business shut down. I showed up to the meeting with a folder full of documents and a plan. Nancy started the meeting with her usual litany of complaints about me. My truck was too loud. I started work too early. I tracked snow into the neighborhood. On and on it went. When she finally paused for breath, I raised my hand. "Can I address the board?" Rita Marshall nodded. "Of course, Nathan." I stood up and opened my folder. "I want to submit a formal complaint about Nancy Griffin's behavior as HOA president. Over the past 3 months, she has filed 14 separate complaints against me, none of which have resulted in any findings of wrongdoing. She has called the police to my house 6 times for false noise complaints. She has attempted to organize a petition to ban my business from the neighborhood. And she has made repeated threats to use her position as HOA president to punish me for not giving her preferential treatment." "That's not true," Nancy said, but her voice was less confident than usual. "I have documentation for all of it." I pulled out copies of police reports, complaint filings, and even some text messages that other board members had forwarded to me where Nancy had tried to pressure them to vote against me. What Nancy is doing is not leadership, it's harassment. And I'm not the only person in this neighborhood she's targeted. Susan Chen leaned forward. "Nancy, is this true? Have you been filing complaints against Nathan specifically because of what happened during the snowstorm?" "I've been filing legitimate complaints about a commercial operation that doesn't belong in a residential neighborhood," Nancy said, but she was starting to look nervous. "The problem is," I continued, "that your complaints aren't legitimate. You're abusing your position as HOA president to settle a personal grudge, and that's not acceptable." Nancy stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "How dare you? I have dedicated 5 years of my life to this community. I've enforced the rules fairly and consistently, even when people like you fight me every step of the way." "You haven't enforced the rules fairly," Mrs. Patterson called out from the audience. "You've used the rules as a weapon against anyone who doesn't do what you want." "I'm filing a motion," Susan Chen said suddenly. "I move that we hold a vote of no confidence in Nancy Griffin's leadership as HOA president." "Seconded," David Park said immediately. Nancy's face went white. "You can't do that." "Actually, we can," Rita Marshall said, pulling out a copy of the HOA bylaws. Section 8 allows for a vote of no confidence if 3 board members support it. Susan, David, and I make 3. We'll hold the vote at our next scheduled meeting in 2 weeks. That gives you time to prepare a defense of your leadership, Nancy. "This is insane," Nancy said. "I'm being attacked for doing my job." "No," I said quietly. "You're being held accountable for abusing your power." Nancy grabbed her things and stormed out of the meeting for the second time in as many months. The room erupted in conversation, and I could see that people were pleased. Nancy had made too many enemies, and now it was all catching up to her. Over the next 2 weeks, the neighborhood was buzzing with gossip. Word spread quickly that there would be a vote of no confidence, and people were taking sides. Most seemed to support removing Nancy from power, but she had her defenders too. A small group of residents who either benefited from her favoritism or genuinely believed in her strict enforcement of the rules rallied around her. Nancy herself went silent. She stopped filing complaints against me, stopped showing up to neighborhood events, and generally seemed to be laying low. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. The vote of no confidence took place on a cold Thursday evening in early March. The community center was packed, with easily over 100 residents crowding into a space meant for 50. The fire marshal probably would have shut us down if he had seen it, but nobody was complaining. Rita Marshall called the meeting to order and explained the process. Nancy would have a chance to defend her leadership, then the board would vote. If 3 out of 5 board members voted no confidence, Nancy would be removed as president and a new election would be scheduled. Nancy stood up, and I could see that she had prepared remarks. Her hands were shaking slightly as she held her papers, but her voice was steady. "I've been president of this HOA for 5 years," she began. "In that time, our property values have increased by 40%. We've won awards for our neighborhood beautification efforts. We've maintained standards that other communities can only dream of. Yes, I've had to make tough decisions. Yes, I've had to enforce rules that some people found inconvenient, but everything I've done has been for the good of this community." She went on for about 10 minutes, listing her accomplishments and defending her actions. Some of what she said was true. The neighborhood did look nice, and property values had gone up. But she carefully avoided mentioning the complaints, the harassment, the way she had wielded her power like a club against anyone who crossed her. When she finished, Rita Marshall asked if anyone wanted to speak in her defense. 3 people stood up and vouched for her, talking about how she had helped them with various issues or how they appreciated her dedication to the community. Then, Rita asked if anyone wanted to speak against her continuing as president. At least 20 hands went up. One by one, people came forward with stories. The young couple whose fence had been measured with a ruler and found to be 3 inches too tall, resulting in a $1,000 fine. The retired teacher who had been threatened with legal action because her garden gnomes were not in keeping with community standards. The family whose kids were told they could not play basketball in their own driveway because the sound of the ball bouncing was a noise violation. The stories went on, painting a picture of an HOA president who had become drunk on power and lost sight of what community leadership actually meant. When everyone had finished speaking, Rita called for the vote. She went down the line, asking each board member to vote yes or no on confidence in Nancy's leadership. Tom Henderson, loyal to the end, voted yes. Rita Marshall voted no. Susan Chen voted no. David Park voted no. Nancy was removed as president with a 4-to-1 vote against her. The room erupted in applause, and Nancy sat there looking stunned. She gathered her things slowly, moving like she was underwater, and walked out of the community center without saying a word. I thought that would be the end of it. Nancy had been removed from power, she had no more authority over me, and I could go back to running my business in peace. But I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Richard. "Nancy Griffin missed her mortgage payment," he said. "It was due 5 days ago and she hasn't paid yet." "That's unusual, right? You said she'd been late before, but she always paid eventually." "Yeah, she's never missed a payment entirely. I'm supposed to send her a formal notice, but since you own the mortgage, I wanted to check with you first." "What do you want to do?" I thought about it. Nancy was probably going through a tough time. She had just been humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood, and she was likely depressed or distracted. Missing a mortgage payment was serious, but it was not necessarily the end of the world. Send the notice, I said. Give her the standard grace period to make the payment. I'm not looking to screw her over, I just want her to stop harassing me. Richard sent the notice, and I waited to see what would happen. The grace period came and went, and Nancy still did not pay. Another notice went out, this one more strongly worded. Still nothing. I was starting to get concerned. If Nancy defaulted on her mortgage, I would have to make a decision about whether to foreclose. That was a messy, expensive process that I had no interest in going through. But I also could not just let her stop paying indefinitely. I decided to reach out to her directly. I sent her an email asking if everything was okay and if there was anything I could do to help. It was a risk, tipping my hand about owning her mortgage, but I felt like I needed to try to resolve this before it got worse. She replied within an hour. You bought my mortgage. I saw the LLC name on the transfer paperwork and I did my research. You own my house now, don't you? This is your revenge for me trying to enforce community standards. I called her immediately and she actually answered. Nancy, this is not revenge. I bought your mortgage as a business investment, yes, but I'm not trying to take your house. I just want you to make your payments like you've been doing. I can't, she said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. I'm selling the house. That's why I needed the driveway plowed that day. I need to downsize, Nathan. I'm broke. The house is too big, the mortgage is too expensive, and I've been struggling for months. I was silent for a moment, processing this. Why didn't you say something? If you were having financial trouble, maybe the board could have reduced your HOA duties or something. She laughed bitterly. And admit weakness. Do you know how many people in this neighborhood hate me? If they knew I was struggling, they'd celebrate. I'd rather lose the house than give them that satisfaction. Nancy, this doesn't have to end badly. If you're selling the house, then you'll pay off the mortgage when it closes, right? If it sells. I had a buyer, but they backed out when they heard about the HOA drama. Apparently, word has gotten around that Meadowbrook Estates is run by a tyrant, and people don't want to move here. The irony was not lost on me. Nancy's own reign of terror had made the neighborhood less desirable, which was now preventing her from selling her house. Listen, I said. I don't want to foreclose on you. That's not good for either of us. What if I give you an extension on the missed payments? You can pay them once the house sells. Why would you do that? Because I'm not a monster, Nancy. I just wanted you to stop harassing me. You're not HOA president anymore, so that problem is solved. Let's just get through this house sale and move on with our lives. She was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry, she said finally. I know I was terrible to you. I was terrible to a lot of people. I just got so caught up in being president, in having power, that I forgot what it was supposed to be about. Yeah, well, we all make mistakes. Try to sell your house and we'll figure out the mortgage situation. Okay. Thank you, Nathan. We hung up, and I sat there thinking about how weird life could be. 3 months ago, Nancy had been my worst enemy, and now I was giving her a break on her mortgage payments. But the story was not over yet. A week after that conversation, I got another call from Richard, and this time he sounded worried. Nathan, we have a problem. I was reviewing Nancy Griffin's mortgage file, and I found something concerning. She took out a second mortgage on the property about 2 years ago, and she's behind on those payments too. The second mortgage holder is starting foreclosure proceedings. Can they do that? Don't I have priority as the first mortgage holder? Yes and no. If they foreclose, you'll get paid first from the sale proceeds. But if the house doesn't sell for enough to cover both mortgages, you could end up taking a loss. And if it goes to foreclosure auction, it's going to sell for way less than market value. How much does she owe on the second mortgage? About 150,000, and she's 4 months behind. They're serious about this, Nathan. I did the math in my head. Nancy's house was worth maybe 850,000 on the open market. She owed 600,000 on my mortgage and 150,000 on the second. Even if the house sold at auction for 70% of market value, there would be enough to cover both mortgages. But it would be cutting it close, and I did not like the risk. I had another option, though. I could pay off the second mortgage myself, adding it to what Nancy owed me. That would stop the foreclosure and give her more time to sell the house properly. It would cost me 150,000 plus the missed payments, but it would protect my investment. It was a gamble. If Nancy never sold the house, I'd be out even more money. But if she did sell, I'd make a decent return and avoid the headache of a foreclosure auction. I talked it over with my accountant and Marcus, and they both thought I was crazy. But there was something about the situation that felt right. Nancy had been a nightmare, but she was also clearly struggling, and I had the means to help her without really hurting myself. I paid off the second mortgage and added the amount to what Nancy owed me on the first. Then I called her and explained what I had done. She was speechless at first. Why would you do that? After everything I did to you, because it's the right thing to do, and because I believe people can change. You screwed up, Nancy. You let power go to your head and you hurt a lot of people. But you don't deserve to lose your house over it. I don't know what to say. Say you'll sell the house as quickly as you can and pay me back. And maybe say you'll think twice before treating people like garbage in the future. I will, I promise. Over the next few months, Nancy worked with a new real estate agent to get her house on the market. She priced it aggressively, and within 6 weeks, she had an offer. The sale closed in early May, and I got a check for $750,000. Which covered both mortgages plus the missed payments and a little interest. Nancy moved to a smaller condo in the next town over, and I heard through the grapevine that she seemed happier there. She was not in charge of anything, had no power over anyone, and was apparently learning to just be a regular person. The HOA elected a new president, a guy named Martin who ran a non-profit and actually understood what community service meant. The harassment complaints dropped to 0, and the neighborhood felt lighter somehow, like we had all been holding our breath for years and could finally exhale. As for me, I made about $50,000 profit on the whole mortgage investment, which was nice but not life-changing. The real win was that I could go back to running my business without constantly looking over my shoulder. Marcus and I expanded the company that summer, adding 2 more trucks and hiring a couple of employees. Business was good, and I was finally able to focus on growing instead of just surviving Nancy's attacks. I ran into her once, about a year after everything went down. It was at a coffee shop in Boston, and we almost walked past each other before recognizing one another. "Nathan," she said, looking nervous. "How are you?" "I'm good. How's the new place?" "It's nice. Smaller but nice. I don't miss the big house as much as I thought I would." We stood there awkwardly for a moment, and then she said, "I never properly thanked you for what you did. Paying off that second mortgage probably saved me from bankruptcy. You thanked me plenty, and you paid me back. We're square. Still, I was awful to you and you helped me anyway. That says a lot about your character. It says a lot about yours too that you can admit you were wrong." Not many people can do that. She smiled, a genuine smile that I had never seen from her before. "I'm trying to be better. I joined a community garden in my new neighborhood. I'm just a regular member, no leadership position or anything. It's nice, actually, not being in charge." "Good for you, Nancy. Really." We said goodbye and went our separate ways, and I realized that I did not have any anger left toward her. She had made my life hell for a while, but she had also taught me something important. Power can corrupt anyone if they are not careful, and showing grace to people at their lowest point is sometimes the most powerful thing you can do. Looking back, the whole situation with Nancy was one of the strangest episodes of my life. I had gone from being harassed by an HOA president to owning her mortgage to helping her avoid foreclosure, all in the span of a few months. It was not how I expected things to play out when she showed up on my doorstep, demanding I plow her driveway first. But life rarely goes the way you expect. Sometimes the people who seem like your enemies are just struggling with their own demons. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all, but kindness. And sometimes, buying your HOA president's mortgage turns out to be the smartest business decision you have ever made. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA is running smoothly these days under Martin's leadership. The rules are still enforced, but with common sense and compassion. People actually enjoy living here now, instead of feeling like they are constantly under surveillance. My snowplow business is thriving, and I have stopped taking on jobs that require me to deal with difficult personalities. Life is too short to spend it arguing with people who think their driveway is more important than everyone else's. And Nancy, as far as I know, is living quietly in her condo, tending her community garden, and hopefully learning that being part of a community is better than trying to control one. Every winter, when the first big snow falls and I'm out there at 5 in the morning clearing driveways, I think about that morning when Nancy showed up at my door in her fur coat. It seems like a lifetime ago, but it was really only 2 years. 2 years that completely changed how I think about conflict, about power, and about the surprising ways that life can work out when you choose to be decent to people, even when they do not deserve it. The best part is that I can park my truck in my driveway without worrying about complaints or threats or board meetings. I can run my business in peace, serve my clients well, and go to bed at night knowing that I treated people fairly, even when they did not treat me the same way. As for Nancy, I hope she has found some peace too. She paid a high price for her years of tyranny, losing her position, her house, and the respect of her neighbors. But she also got a second chance, and from what I have heard, she is taking it seriously. The whole experience taught me that HOAs can be tools for good or weapons for bad, depending on who is wielding them. They can help communities maintain standards and resolve conflicts, or they can become platforms for petty tyrants to exercise power over their neighbors. The difference comes down to the character of the people in charge and the willingness of the community to hold them accountable. These days, when I hear HOA horror stories from friends or read about them online, I nod sympathetically and share my own experience. But I always end with the same point. Sometimes the solution is not to fight fire with fire, but to find a creative way to change the power dynamic. In my case, that meant buying Nancy's mortgage. In other cases, it might mean running for the board yourself, organizing the neighbors, or simply documenting everything and building a case for removal. The key is not to give up and not to let the bullies win. People like Nancy thrive when everyone else is too tired or too scared to stand up to them. But when the community comes together and says, "Enough," even the most entrenched tyrant can be toppled. I am grateful that things worked out the way they did. I made money, Nancy got a second chance, and the neighborhood is better for everyone. It is not the ending I expected when this whole mess started, but it is definitely the one I needed. And if I ever have to deal with another HOA Karen in the future, well, at least I will know that there are creative solutions out there. Sometimes the best way to win is not to play their game at all, but to change the rules entirely. The snow is falling again outside my window as I write this, and I can hear my truck warming up in the driveway. Time to get to work. I have clients to serve, driveways to clear, and a business to run. And this time, nobody is going to demand I put them first in line. Business is good, life is good, and the HOA can kiss my ass. Respectfully, of course.